There's been a great deal of public debate around the extension of the states of emergency in St. James, in St. Catherine North, and in parts of the corporate area. In my view, there are two things that should be considered for any extension. In fact, for any method or strategy of crime fighting. The first, is it legal? Is it lawful? And the second, is it effective? The Constitution says for a state of emergency to be declared or extended, the Governor General must be satisfied, Governor General in the first instance, then Parliament, that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. Now, that does not mean merely high crime. It means that there is an orchestrated effort to destabilize Jamaica or some part of Jamaica. Now, clearly, the situation in St. James today, as well as St. Catherine North and the corporate area, does not meet that standard. Therefore, to continue to extend it would be unlawful. And just to further illustrate how it wouldn't make any sense at all, if we believe that just high crime is what warrants the extension, then how could we extend it in St. James with a murder rate this year of 55 per 100,000 and St. Catherine with a murder rate of 38 per 100,000, but yet continue to ignore the situation in Westmoreland with a murder rate of 96 per 100,000? It just doesn't make sense. The second measure that we must use is effectiveness. Is a state of emergency or states of emergency an effective national crime fighting strategy? Some feel that this is the only thing that has worked in recent past. Well, that's not so, because we see that in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015, with no states of emergency, the number of murders in Jamaica were significantly lower than in 2018, where we've had 3 states of emergency. When we also look at other measures of police effectiveness, when we look at the number of arrests, more so the number of arrests with evidence, where you're more likely to get a conviction, when we look at the seizure of firearms and ammunition, all those measures have shown a diminished performance in 2018 versus 2017. And finally, if we look at the actual number of murders on a monthly basis during the course of 2018, what we see is that it started the year very high at 144 murders in January. The first state of emergency was declared, and we see a distinct downward trend up until June. Thereafter, it has plateaued. In fact, if anything, there's a slight upward trend to November, where we had 110 murders. So you had murders dropping to low 90s in June from 144, but now has started to maybe plateauing, but perhaps with a slight upward trend to reach 110. So what we see there demonstrated is that a state of emergency is really a short-term measure. It has a short-term impact. It's designed to be used very surgically, very sparingly, not as an ongoing crime-fighting tool. Finally, the public tends to confuse the saturation level of policing, seeing a lot of police and military in their communities, with a state of emergency. The fact is, 99% of what is done under a state of emergency can be done under either the JCF Act, Section 15, or the Zones of Special Operations Act. The only thing that we cannot do is detain persons indefinitely without charge. In St. James today, we have 20 persons detained. Does it make sense to suspend the rights of the almost 200,000 residents of St. James just to keep 20 persons detained without charge? I don't think so. As a constitutional democracy, we must ensure that crime-controlled efforts are disciplined by the rule of law, due process, and respect for human rights and dignity. Any suspension of these rights must be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society.